welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm sure more will trickle in, but we'll go ahead and get started now. My name is Amy Gray. I'm the Media and Publications Project Coordinator for LCMS Youth Ministry, and joining us today is Seth Hinz, the Web and Media Manager for the Michigan District of the LCMS. He also served in 2013 and will for the 2016 LCMS Youth Gathering be our Social Media Manager. He holds degrees from Concordia University, Ann Arbor in Business Communication and a Master's in Organizational Leadership and Administration, and lives in Ann Arbor with his wife Rachel and their two young sons, Judah and Samson. Seth, it's great to have you here with us.
Great. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, a couple of things to talk about before we get rolling. You'll see the chat box on the left-hand side of your screen. That's the way we'll keep this more like a conversation. Towards the end, there will be a time for Q&A, and I'll be monitoring those questions, and we'll feed them to Seth at that time to answer those questions for you. We'll go ahead and begin in prayer, if you would join me. Lord, thank you for our time today. Thank you for this means of communication and way in which we can gather. Thank you for Seth, for the ways you have gifted and called him, and for the information he will share with us on digital citizenship. Bless and empower him. Thank you for the gift of technology and social media. Make us good stewards of these gifts and faithful witnesses and citizens in this digital world. In your name, Jesus. Amen. All right, Seth, the floor is yours.
Very good. Thank you for having me. Is my audio coming through okay? I think we're good.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It's afternoon here, at least 3 p.m. in the Eastern time zone. Appreciate you taking some time to be here today and talk a little bit about digital citizenship, but how that's kind of unique in our situation as Christians. Not only are we talking about, what a boss may see online or anything like that, but how we behave as Christians and what that means, and how we interact with each other, and how the Bible kind of informs us and kind of leads us as we think about social media, and we think about digital media, and we think about offline behavior as well. So thank you for being here. All right. So basically, this is the whole presentation that we're going to be talking about today. Social media is part of life. There are rules to the road, and we can educate youth effectively. There are ways to do that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. As we go ahead, if you have any questions, you can obviously add them in the chat box there through any meeting. If you're on Twitter, feel free to use the hashtag to ask questions or just communicate throughout the webinar today. You can tweet to LCMSyouth. You can also connect with me at just Seth Hinz on Twitter. So, in 1 minute on social media, there are 2,460,000 pieces of content shared on Facebook, 277,000 tweets, 3,472 pinned images, and 72 hours of video uploaded to YouTube. On populations of social media, Facebook is growing still. They're at 1.28 billion people. That's just a shave under China's population, making it the second largest country in the world. There are 550 million people on Twitter, 150 million on Instagram, 70 million on Pinterest, and those populations are all always growing. Percentages: 50% of the population of the entire world is under 30 years old. 95% of those teens, in a study conducted by Pew Research Center, said 95% of teens use the internet. 74% of them use mobile. 81% use social networking. One important stat is that 1 in 5 couples meet online. 1 in 5 divorces is blamed on social media. Social media has a large impact on not only our online relationships, but our offline as well. So this is all stuff we have to understand. And 7 seconds, that is the attention span of the average teen, I would say person these days. So chances are I've already lost you at this point. Social media truth number 1. It is not just Facebook. It is not just Twitter. It is not just Instagram. Social media encompasses kind of any place online where communication is happening, two-way engagement is happening. And so you can see kind of through this conversation prism here that it is not just Facebook. It's also forums we're talking about. It's also answer things like Yahoo Answers, Quora, all the different sites that are out there. Medium is coming up as a new kind of broadcast thing. Tinder, way people are meeting online. There are so many different things that are happening out there that we just have to be aware that's not just Facebook. And to be effective in our jobs, as we're trying to educate and guide people, we have to be aware of new environments online that come up, and we also have to be willing to dedicate time to it. I'm not crazy about, I don't recommend Snapchat, but we have to understand how it works so we can have those conversations. So that's just one example. But as you're going through your job, don't be afraid to create accounts, private accounts, whatever it is, around the internet, just so you understand how things work. It's part of being responsible on our end, but it also helps us when we go to have those conversations that we can be using the same terminology, but also just know how communication and how interaction happens on those platforms. Social media truth number 2, virtual community is real community. Just some communities start as extensions of already physical communities, such as like your church starts up a Facebook page. It's an extension of who a real community is now on Facebook. And so there's kind of the online, offline transitions that happen. So that's one example of community, but there's also communities that are completely virtual, created, gathered, developed, and sustained exclusively online. And so we have to be aware that there are different types of community, and it can't be, online can't be disregarded as just a virtual community that isn't technically real, that it's not IRL or in real life or face-to-face. There's that digital immigrant versus digital native, how we grew up, kind of my generation and older, without internet, without interaction, without Facebook. And now we're at the point where the next generation's coming up and they're digital natives. They've never known anything different. So that kind of community that happens online and offline, there's really no hard and fast line. It's blurred at best. And so you just have to be aware that what happens on digital to a younger community, that may seem like that is real community. That is real interaction to them. So it can't be disregarded or kind of just shoved away in a corner and saying that only happens over there, so it's okay. It's life now, so we just have to be aware of that. I like sharing this graphic. It comes from Meredith Gould's book, The Social Media Gospel. It talks about the trajectory of engagement. And this is kind of how you can move people from online to offline. And so when you're thinking about can online interactions serve a purpose, relationships, like we said, 1 in 5 couples meet online. Those relationships start there. They eventually move to deeper engagement. So it may start off with tweets, may lead to email, may lead to then phone, all before you even meet face to face. And so that can happen not only in relationships, couples, but also in the church. How we reach out to people online and how we connect with them can eventually lead to face to face. And that could be a goal of ours. To think in this way, that not everything has to exist online, but if it exists online, we have to know how to respect that too. So values of this new media culture, and these were laid out in the book The Social Church by Justin Wise. He kind of references one of his mentors, Cynthia Ware, who talks about the new media values, and they are interactivity, sharing, personalization, ubiquity, and connectedness. And they go on to describe it in the book. Basically, when someone speaks, we need to listen and respond. The community demands value. Otherwise, what's the point? So you bring value to the communities online by creating, curating, sharing great information, great stories, and just providing great care to other people. Not saying, I'm here to speak at you, but I'm here to share a life with you. So personalization at the end there means we don't spam the world and expect results. Experience has to be a little bit different for everybody. And so we get that through one-on-one interactions online. So when we want to think about going viral and all that kind of stuff, honestly, maybe the most effective relationships we can have are those one-on-one conversations. So finally, if we're respecting those new media values, it's important that we're present anywhere and everywhere. If we set up a tent on Pinterest or something, be ready to interact, because people will comment on tents. People will comment on Facebook posts. People will comment on Twitter. If we schedule out our entire kind of life on Twitter through apps like Buffer or Hootsuite and never actually dig in and spend time on engagement, there's not really a point there, because you're not really setting up engagement. So when you think about how am I going to interact online and how I'm going to interact with youth, think about when you're scheduling your week, where am I going to find time to actually be on the platform and communicate with people who are trying to communicate with me? And how can we be intentional about that? To show kind of the new media values in a picture, you may have seen this. It's Pope Benedict being kind of, ordained. I don't know what they call it in Catholic Church. I think it's the ordination of Pope Benedict. And then this is the ordination of Pope Francis. So you can see in two pictures there how everything's kind of changed. And it's not good or bad. It's just a new reality that we kind of have to deal with. When we talk about digital natives and digital immigrants, this is what we talk about. This is just part of life now. And we have to be okay saying there's no problem with that, and we just have to respect those boundaries. Social media versus traditional, and this is, again, just to kind of hammer home that point. Traditional media for the longest time was push. It was one-way communication. Commercials would come at us. There's nothing we could kind of respond back with. Newspapers would send us information. Everything would come through the radio, and there's no way to talk back and kind of have those conversations with organizations, with people, with individuals. And social media has changed that. You see that through the proliferation of sites like Yelp or Google Reviews or Amazon, where purchases and relationships and everything are built on honest feedback and honest reviews, and how much we trust those reviews, even though we've never met the people reviewing those things. So it gives us a voice saying, like, this is a product we want, or this is a product we don't want. This is what we want to talk about online. If there's a blog post that comes out that's controversial, we have an opportunity to actually go back and say, in comment sections and on Twitter and on Facebook, this is how we actually feel about what you just said. So you can talk directly to authors. So that's kind of just how the whole conversation is shifted to a two-way conversation instead of a one-way conversation. And so as these new communities are forming online and as people are connecting, that's when we start to talk about digital citizenship. And it's for a reason. And Amy, if you could bring up that video. Okay, so what he said there, it's safety for a purpose. It's safety to enable them to have an opportunity to form and to create relationships online that are healthy, that are productive, and ultimately will become the foundation for what we call digital citizenship. And why is this important? That's kind of the next video we have here, is you leave a footprint. Everything we do online is ultimately going to be permanent, so we have to kind of understand that. Okay, we are all leaving a digital footprint. Let me make sure. So once it's online, it's virtually impossible to scrub out. Once somebody takes something and runs with it, that's kind of the end of that. So anything you put online, be aware that there is some permanence there, and that data will follow you around for the rest of your life. So as we're talking about digital citizenship, 9 themes that kind of exist here that we were talking about. And these are the 9 elements, and we'll talk about a few of them. So you've got etiquette, literacy, access, security, health and wellness, commerce, communication, rights and responsibilities, and the law. So for digital access, technology users need to be aware of and support electronic access for all to create a foundation for digital citizenship. Digital exclusion of any kind does not enhance the growth of users in electronic society. All should have fair access to technology, no matter who they are. Places or organizations with limited connectivity need to be addressed as well. To become productive citizens, we need to be committed to equal digital access. And these are kind of all outlined in the website that I've got posted there for you, so I won't go through them all here, but so we've got digital commerce, digital communication, digital literacy, digital etiquette, law, rights and responsibilities, health and wellness, and digital security. And those can be broken down into three categories: respect, educate, protect. Respect yourself, respect others, etiquette, access, and the law. Educate yourself and connect with others, communication, literacy, and commerce. And this is where we'll put some of our focus. And then protect yourself and protect others, rights and responsibilities, safety, security, health, and welfare. And so this is where we talk about being digital Christians. And I'd like to start off kind of that conversation with a poem that's kind of an adaptation of an early prayer, and that's also from Meredith Gould, and it goes, Christ has no online presence but yours, no blog, no Facebook page but yours. Yours are the tweets through which love touches this world. Yours are the posts through which the gospel is shared. Yours are the updates through which hope is revealed. Christ has no online presence but yours, no blog, no Facebook page but yours. So when we think about kind of how we behave online, I came across 10 cross-centered commandments that were put out by a pastor kind of outside of our church, but they're still founded in the Bible, and I love what he had. His name's David Platt, and if you Google 10 cross-centered commandments, there's a wonderful study that he put together on it, and I'm going to hit on some of the key points of that, but it's a wonderful look at kind of how we can behave online. So we say fear God, and each one of these is founded with a biblical verse. He actually outlined in his study many, many verses. So fear God, and he references Proverbs 15:3. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good. We need to know when we're on social media and online that when we feel like we're in some deep, dark recess of the internet, and that's how where we're interacting with people, and nobody's going to see this, know the eyes of the Lord are in every place. We need to flee sexual immorality. Matthew 5:28. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. It's so difficult online to find a safe place where ads aren't trying to reach you, things aren't trying to reach you, and we just need to address this when we talk to youth, when we talk to coworkers, that we shouldn't shy away from this topic, but it needs to be addressed because it can become a serious problem. We need to speak wisely. Psalm 19:14. What I say glorify God? Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. That's something that I like to post wherever I'm working. I like to have it because I interact on Facebook and Twitter and all those throughout the day. And so when you're about to kind of interact with somebody, it's good to have that reminder of Psalm 19:14. Just let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. If you could have that reminder for yourself put somewhere, it's just helpful when you may see something where you want to react. It's important to also remember that while it's okay to have an opinion, you don't always have to share it. And while at the same time, it's okay to not have an opinion about everything. It's okay. We also need to communicate honestly. And references Proverbs 12:22. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. Cultivate humility. So if anybody would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? We need to have accountability. We need to listen to advice and accept instruction that you may gain wisdom in the future. And that's from Proverbs 19:20, but also Hebrews 10:24. Let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. How can we, through our online interactions, be intentional about encouraging other people and not engaging in those conversations that will not get us anywhere, but will only incite further arguments or anything like that. We need to maintain mastery. 1 Corinthians 6:12. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. Guard your heart. Proverbs 12:26. One who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. Renew your mind. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Philippians 4:8. And finally, redeem your time. Make the most of every opportunity. Redeem your time at work, your time to rest, your time with people, and your time with God. We need to set safe boundaries for ourselves, and we need to talk about what safe boundaries are and how we don't get consumed by the electronics, because it's very addicting. And there's studies being done on brain activity and addiction, and how if you go to something like Reddit or something and you're seeing image after image after image, and your brain gets a little bit of dopamine, and it's just hitting that kind of pleasure center. And we need to be aware that it is very easy to fall into the trap of social media addiction or digital addiction to our devices. So think about how we can set boundaries and how we can talk about that with youth and also our coworkers. I like to just focus in on just listen to Proverbs. Again, we said the eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good. When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. And how often do we see that online, myself included, engaging in those arguments or debates where we just really want to make our point heard, and it doesn't really go anywhere. And finally, maybe most important is, a fool's lips walk into a fight and his mouth invites a beating. Something to think about there. So, stepping back, thinking about being digital Christians and kind of equipping the next generation for that. How do we find a way to do that? And I want to share one kind of teach in 5 sessions kind of approach to it. This was developed by a woman named Holly Clark, and you can use the Common Sense Media link at the bottom there to kind of get at a scope and sequence for this. But in 5 days or 5 sessions, however you meet with people, you can create an acceptable use policy. You can say to your youth group and people that are around you, we need to sit down and actually have a conversation about what acceptable use is, and in that, what are the important topics that we need to cover? How are we going to engage with each other? How will we represent the organization of which we're a part? When youth in your youth group are going to an event, let's say the National Youth Gathering or a district youth event or anything like that, if there's a hashtag or conversations happening online, photos being shared, not only the photos that you share at those events are public, they may be in the public stream when you add the hashtag, but at that point, anybody can kind of see your material if you're not setting your privacy correctly. So it may be a great post, that great picture that you're posting from there with a great thought, but once somebody goes into your stream, what are they seeing? What are they seeing from your past posts? Are they seeing a bunch of selfies? Or are they seeing unacceptable pictures, maybe inappropriate pictures? And then just it's stuff we need to be aware of. So sitting down that first day and creating an acceptable use policy is very important. So, and it's a good opportunity to have a conversation, to talk about your digital footprint and talk about how we interact as Christians, not only online but offline, and connecting the two. Day 2, you can discuss online privacy, how to appropriately set up your networks, how to talk about what's public and what's not public. So you can cover all those things there. Day 3 is personal identity. This is where we get at what I was talking about before about how do we represent ourselves and what do people see when they're looking at our content, and what are we showing as Christians? What are we promoting? So everything's pretty much public. The line's gone now. Even when you mark private on things, or even in Snapchat, I mean, those things are saved somewhere. And you never know when somebody's going to take something and kind of run with it. So how do we, I think one of the good practices that was shared in this Day 3 personal identity was an exercise where you Googled yourself. You sat down with youth and you actually Google yourself and see what kind of things come up. Do you have a large digital footprint, or are you in a situation where you have no digital footprint? I think you have to strike a balance between the two, and this was said in that article that if you have a large digital footprint, if you're all over the place, be aware of what images anybody can see, a potential employer or somebody that you're talking to for the first time that you've met. Maybe they'll Google you or something like that. If you don't have a personal identity online, if you're not able to be found, what is that also saying about you? And does that open up an opportunity for someone to come in and take over your digital identity or your brand or reputation? So are there ways that you can be intentional about kind of creating a digital identity that accurately represents who you want to be or who you are and who we are in Christ? Because I think when you don't have anything, you also run the risk of that being taken over by anybody, and you don't control the conversation at that point, or you don't have as much as control. So it's an interesting conversation to have. Digital communication, we covered kind of what we talked about at that point. And then digital etiquette, just how we treat each other. Holly Clark, again, was the person that kind of put this together. Thankfully, we have a huge resource for us in Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media is taking on digital citizenship right now with a bunch of free resources. If you go to Common Sense Media, and go /educators, you can search and find actual, I think there's like 4-unit lesson plan where they take you through all the different categories that you can cover. So you can go through those kind of lesson plans and pick and choose what might fit into that 5-day plan. What do you want to cover? And it's all here for you. It's got assessments. It's got everything that you need there. So grades 9 through 12, they've put applicable kind of content there for you to use. And I think we can, while this doesn't cover from a Christian perspective, I think it gives us a solid foundation from where we can sit down with Digital Life 102, that first lesson there, and say, okay, now how can we also add in the elements of our faith and say, what as a Christian informs us how we behave, and what does digital life mean through the lens of scriptures, and how does that inform us as Christians, but as also citizens online and offline. So I would encourage you kind of over the next few weeks, if you feel like this fits into your kind of schedule, maybe think about going in and checking out one of the lesson plans, see what's there, and see if there's a way to adapt it to youth ministry. And I guess my concern would be that if we don't address it, who's going to be teaching it then? Then they may come from the perspective of, maybe the public schools, and that's fine. But I think we have a real opportunity to talk about digital citizenship and not avoid the topic. We can't just pretend that Snapchat or Facebook or Twitter or anything out there doesn't exist, but we can sit down with people and walk them through it and talk about appropriate use. One of the kind of illustrations I saw when I was doing research for this presentation was, we don't teach kids how to drive by sitting in a classroom necessarily and teaching them and talking about, here's how you do the right turn signal, and this is how you turn the wheel, and this is how you accelerate. Yeah, you put them in the situation, and you're there with them to kind of walk alongside them, or, not too terrified, I hope, but at the same time, you're there, and you're with them, and you're showing them appropriate use. You're showing them how to behave on the road. I think in the same way we can now think about digital media and address it openly and have honest discussions about it and sit down with them and say, here's how I use Facebook. Here's me living as an example of how I connect with my friends. Here's what I talk about. And I think if we can model for the youth what an effective solid Christian digital citizen looks like, I think that's a tremendous opportunity for the church. And having resources like Common Sense Media is just such a great foundation for us. That's kind of my kind of initial thoughts there. I would love to take whatever questions you might have about that. There's a lot we could talk about when it comes to digital citizenship, but I want to kind of know what your questions are about it. What are the challenges that you see, and what are you facing in your work, in your ministry that we could talk about today and maybe hopefully answer some of those questions. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to add them to the chat window. like LCMS Youth Ministry did there, or tweet. But
Thanks,
digital
Seth. I have a question for you.
Please.
Okay. I really appreciated what you were saying about modeling this yourself, modeling what it means to be a Christian digital citizen, and showing the youth what it means, not just telling them. What's a way that you personally try to model this? I know that you do a good job of living your life both in real time as well as online. What's one way that you are intentional about trying to model being a Christian digital citizen?
Christian digital citizen. I would say it'd probably go back about 2 or 3 years ago, when maybe 2008, when the elections were happening, and I decided I needed to voice every single opinion I had about everything. And what I found was every time I engaged in one of those conversations, the wedge between myself and even my relatives grew deeper, and we grew further apart. We got more hostile towards each other. And I kind of finally had to sit down after a year of participating in this just kind of crude and self-focused kind of way and say, is this helpful in any way? Am I actually changing hearts right now? I ran into a situation where I would talk about something, and online we have to, it doesn't always get past the surface level of a conflict or a disagreement. And so when you're arguing with people, maybe, and I've had to stop doing this, when you're having a debate with somebody online, and they see you're connected to a Christian organization, which we do. I connect all my things to my organization. When we connect those, that's what we're showing the world. That's what Christians are about. We're about arguing. We're about getting our point across. We're about only being focused on almost like law, just attacking people with scripture. And that didn't help anybody. That wasn't developing any relationships any further. And so I had to kind of shift. And some of my relatives, and I'm intentional about this, they post still political things or religious differences, things that I would disagree with. And I would have to say, and I'm very intentional about this, I don't interact with those posts. First of all, I don't hide them, but I don't interact with them. When a relative or friend posts something that is not controversial, I'm intentional about connecting with them in that way. When they post a picture from a vacation, I go out and comment on it and say, looks like you had a great time, or what fun, what was your favorite thing that happened. I engage with the content on which we can have common ground, because I want that to reflect kind of the love of Christ. I don't want to dwell on our differences. I want to kind of celebrate what we have in common. It's okay to be human once in a while. It's okay to not try to convert with every status update. And so that's actually really helped kind of repair some relationships, but also build new ones. And so that's one intentional step I took, was not engaging with everything I had an opinion on. And I think that's really important for all of us to consider. We don't have to say something.
Cool. Thanks, Seth. We have a question here from Ryan Howard from California, and he's wondering how we as people who are part of this webinar, who perhaps understand the importance of this topic, can communicate this to others who maybe don't have an awareness or don't recognize the importance of the impression that we're making online. How can we go about respectfully and lovingly share the importance of this with others?
Sure. Two things. Common Sense Media, I would definitely look into that resource. And they have a lot of free videos that they develop that talk about exactly this. And they talk about those topics. Like the video I shared that was, not the guy talking, but the other one. That's a free Common Sense video that you can download and share wherever. They also have like a host of other videos that you can access for free and start the conversations if you decide to do like a 5-day training or a 5-session training. If you go to YouTube and search for Digital Citizenship, you can start going through and seeing videos that address topics that we want to talk about, that raise awareness in like a minute or 2 minutes, that can open a conversation. I would say if you can make use of those in your immediate kind of conversations or youth meetings that you may have, use those resources. How important it actually is. We had a situation, and I'll just share an experience we had at our district youth gathering where we had a public hashtag that we were using, and we were monitoring Instagram to kind of see what happens there. And one of the youth was posting some really interesting stuff. He was really engaged with the event. But he also posted some things that were controversial, to say the least. They were very inappropriate. And what happened, we had to address it from a district perspective and from a organizer's perspective. And so we had to have that conversation. So we talked to the youth leader and raised their awareness about that and said, this is what's happening in the public stream. I think you need to be aware of it. And what that did was it made the youth leader aware, but it also opened up an opportunity to have that conversation so that the youth leader could lovingly sit down with the youth and explain that other people had seen this. He's not just sharing it with, nobody, just his friends. I mean, other people could see it. The post eventually came down, but, times when we slip up and times when we fall down on those kind of like, oh, I can post this and not have any repercussions. Those are actually really good learning experiences. And, I would just say take advantage of those opportunities. With new things coming up all the time, it's okay to address it, but I don't address it. I think one of our biggest problems, maybe, even as a larger discussion, would be how often and how should we address things online? Should it happen online or should it be an offline conversation? So it's just something to think about and really a good opportunity to open a conversation. So hopefully that. Okay.
Ooh, we just got a big one that came in from Corby. Okay. How can I stay connected with the latest social media platforms? Seems like that they're ever evolving.
Yep.
How can you stay in the know, if you will, on everything going on, as you mentioned early in your presentation about being aware and also that it's more than just Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc.
Sure. Great question, Corby. It's tough. It's really tough because we all have limited time, and we like to use Facebook to connect with our relatives too, so we don't always see it as like a learning experience per se or research. For me, whenever a new I try to stay up on blogs that talk about the most recent trends going on in social media. Alltop, ALLTOP.com is one of those sites that aggregates content from across the internet and shares what the most popular stuff going on is. And so you can go into a category like social media and you can track with everything that is kind of the latest happening in social media. So I try to check in maybe 5-10 minutes a day just to see if there's anything new that kind of came up. And maybe if you could share that link, it's, let me type it out for you here, socialmedia.alltop.com. That's one way that I stay engaged. And so when a new platform comes out, I try to go out and create an account, mainly just to claim the space. There's another Seth Hins out there. But also just to make myself aware of how the platform works and how it interacts. I try and share. I mean, I have a Snapchat, but I don't say, hey, let's engage with this with my youth. I don't do that, but you have to kind of, if you don't create an account, then you're setting yourself up for a huge host of issues of not knowing how to have the conversation, of not saying here's a good way to use it or not, so I think if you can stay, Mashable is another one specifically that you can look and see the latest going on social media. So I think you just need to be committed to making time for research. And if you can set aside 15 minutes a week, even like on a Monday or a Friday, and say, I'm going to read the latest stuff that's happened, that's one way to do it.
Seth, when you were mentioning the cross-centered commandments, you talked about the need to renew your mind as well as redeem your time and setting boundaries, some things like that. And I heard you mention setting 15 minutes aside a week to stay up to date on recent blog posts, etc. what are some other things that you do or that you would recommend for setting boundaries on, even just for yourself, to not become addicted or dependent, or you can't leave your phone, those kinds of things, as we think about renewing our mind and redeeming our time to refresh ourselves?
Sure. I mean, I have 2 young kids, as Amy said. One of the biggest challenges is that my job is kind of social media related, and I need to be on that stuff. But it has and is a problem that I kind of always have to be aware of how much I use my phone at home, how much I'm on it. One of the kind of action steps that I took was setting up a charging station in my home. And if you can set up a charging station somewhere that is either right by the door or away from main areas, that would be one way to go about it. So every time I come home, I set my phone in a little dock over here, and then I just leave it. And then I go be with my family and spend time with them. I mean, the temptation's there to always be looking at my phone every other 10 minutes to see, what did somebody say about this or what. So I think you just have to be intentional about carving out time. One of the biggest things you can do is make sure that you don't plug in your phone by your bed. I know some of us use it as an alarm clock. I think I still do once in a while. But if you can intentionally not plug it in right there, then the temptation to wake up, roll over, and check your phone, or stay up all night scrolling through something, thinking, oh, just one more, and then get stuck there for half an hour. I think you just have to be intentional about where you put your phone. Sometimes, like church, if you can leave your phone in the car, or sometimes, when I was talking about the charging station, sometimes I leave my phone in my car when I get home and charge it there instead. And so I'm just intentional about separating myself from the physical device. And that is one way of disconnecting from that to reconnect and be there with your family, and just set those boundaries.
Cool. Brandon Heath asked a question about just some practical do's and don'ts for creating an online community, maybe some things to keep in mind as we think about spurring each other on or creating a real community in this virtual community, just some do's and don'ts of what would be helpful in creating that community.
That's a really good question. Some do's and don'ts. I'm going to have to think about that one.
Things to keep in mind. Yeah.
Things to keep in mind when you're creating a community. I think the most important thing to remember is when you're interacting online, on the other side of whoever you're talking to is a real person. I think we can get stuck in the mindset that it's not real. Maybe it's partially like a video game sort of thing. It's just happening on digital. But there are real people going through real things. So I think when you're building a community, I think laying down ground rules is one of the most important things we've done in the Michigan District. If you went to our Facebook page, Michigan District of the LCMS, you would be able to go to our About section and see kind of our disclaimer. It's rooted in the Bible. We say we're intentional about building a community of people that is hopeful and builds each other up and does not tear each other down. We lay flat out the comments that will be deleted. We say this is appropriate use of our page. You own your pages when you create a page on Facebook. That's your space. You can do what you want to. You don't have to leave a comment up. And setting up policies for yourself is just really important. And doing that with your staff is really important too. If you're trying to grow a community, one of the fastest ways you can do that is by connecting with people offline and saying, hey, people if you're in a church setting and you want a page to grow, the best thing you can do is get the whole staff on board. And you can do that through kind of laying out what our goals are for this page, what we're trying to do here, and how you can help and how you can be a part of it, and how we can all kind of grow this together. Each person on your staff has a different community online that they connect with. And if you can help bring them into the strategy for what you're trying to do, and then they take that content from the church and push it out to their communities, the potential to reach people grows a lot more, rather than sectioning maybe communications into a tiny office and saying that just happens over there. I think having staff conversations, if your leader or your pastor is not on board, you're just going to run into problems. So if you can get your whole staff on board before trying to build out a community, I think that's huge. Do you have any more specific questions about that, Brandon? I want to make sure that I address those. So.
Yeah, I asked that as well, and he says that's great, awesome.
All right, thanks, Brandon.
Any other questions from you guys? Appreciate the thoughts shared here before we move forward and wrap up for today.
Very good. There are a lot of resources for acceptable use policies. The LCMS, if you go to the LCMSgathering.com site, there are some great covenant templates that you can use for going to the gathering, but you can also adapt them for, this is how our youth group's going to treat each other. This is how we're going to behave when we meet once a week, once a month, whatever it is. Take advantage of those resources. Check out what's going on with the youth e-source. There's always great stuff going on there. So take advantage of the resources and don't be afraid to adapt them to your context. Okay, another question came in here. Currently, our church has its own Facebook page. Oh, so what are some other good ways to connect church members via Facebook in a meaningful way? That's a really good question. And that's something I think everybody struggles with. I think there needs to be an element of cross-promotion, and I know it's kind of a marketing term. But if you don't make Facebook an intentional part of your church community, then it will not be used. If it's just seen as a verse kind of machine that's over and over, I don't know if you'll get the engagement that you want. There are intentional ways that you can use Facebook and connect with other people. There are two things that I'll share. If you remember the Bible mini-series that came out, those were happening, on the hour, 8 o'clock on a Sunday. And what we had a few of our churches decide to do was the pastors decided to say during church that morning, log on to Facebook, connect to our Facebook page, and we will be there live. They posted a photo, and then there was just an ongoing chat going on throughout the whole episode of the Bible miniseries. So as members were in church, they heard, oh yeah, we've got a Facebook page, so there's a fresh reminder. But also the engagement went way up because there was a tremendous amount of value there. Being able to go through a Bible miniseries, which has a huge production value, and then actually sit down and be able to ask your pastor like a question live like that is just huge. So that was one example of how they integrated Facebook in. They merged kind of offline and online community in that way. So think about those opportunities. Maybe it takes the shape of our pastor has online office hours. So you say during church, hey, if you have a question, about anything, I'm either going to be on Facebook at this time, and you post a photo saying, I'm here, that kind of thing, and be consistent with that. So your parishioners kind of latch on to that idea that I know pastor's going to be there right then, and I can talk to him either through chat or either through that public message board. You can do the same thing through Twitter or any kind of platform that's out there. But be intentional, talk about it, and then put your link everywhere. Put it in the bulletin. Put it on your website. Definitely, if you don't have them on your homepage somewhere, your link over to Facebook, find a way to get that there. So people know when they see your church maybe for the first time online, they like your website. That's great. But that website and that click over to Facebook is where people see the real community. So you need to be intentional about at your community events, any kind of Bible studies or anything. Don't be afraid to take pictures. I think one of the best investments you can do these days is invest in a quality camera that will take high quality pictures, because that's how people communicate right now. Photos get so much more engagement. I think it's like 40 times more engagement than just text posts. So find a way to bring in visual imagery in an intentional way. So those are just two examples, but I mean that's a large conversation. I hope that helps, Ryan. Good.
Okay, if you have more questions, maybe we can stay on a little bit later, but for those who need to keep the 1 hour commitment, Seth, let's go ahead and give our final thoughts.
Sure. Great. So final thought. It really all can be boiled down to this. We talked a lot about, setting up, a strategy for talking about this and making it a curriculum and all that kind of stuff. But really, it just boils down to think. And maybe you've seen this posted. I've seen it posted a lot of different places. But think. True, helpful, inspiring, necessary, kind. If you can ingrain that and just share that with youth, post that by your computer, post that on your phone, if people can think through this before they post, if they can think through before they post, I think we'd all be a lot better off. I think it would stop a lot of the problems that we see online, but it would also reshape the conversation, and people would be more focused on inspiring others, encouraging others, and encouraging others in their faith. So if you can just share that with people, I think it would go a long way. And so that's just my concluding thought there. Thanks for allowing me to kind of share this today, and I appreciate your time, Amy, and everybody that showed up. So thank you very much, and feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or Twitter and continue the conversation there. I'd love to hear from you, but thank you.
Well, thanks, Seth. Really appreciate you sharing with us today and leading this conversation, and thanks to all of you who made the time to join us today on a really great and relevant topic for us to continue to discuss and think through. A recording of this webinar will be posted on Facebook and Twitter, as well as the Youth eSource. It should be posted by tomorrow, by the end of the week for sure. The Youth eSource, again, is your one-stop shop for all LCMS Youth Ministry resources. It's youthesource.com. And also next month in September, we will be hosting a webinar on the 2016 LCMS Youth Gathering theme, In Christ Alone. We'll be joined by the Reverend Joel Landbauer, who's the theological advisor for the gathering, as well as Mark Kiesling, the gathering program director. And they'll be walking through some of the theological and thematic development and foundation for In Christ Alone based on the book of Philippians. That will be September 9th. That's a Tuesday at noon Central Time. Until then, hope that you guys do well and continue to practice being faithful digital citizens. Thanks so much. We'll see you guys later.